You are standing at the edge of a financial precipice, and the ground beneath your feet is about to shift in a way we haven't seen in nearly a century. Deep inside the marble halls of the Federal Reserve, a power struggle is brewing that will determine exactly how much your paycheck is worth. For decades, the Fed has operated like a shadow government, an untouchable fortress of economists making decisions behind closed doors that ripple through every corner of your life. But the era of quiet independence is screaming toward a violent halt as a new political storm prepares to breach its walls. President Donald Trump is preparing to appoint a new leader to head the Federal Reserve, a move that is much more than a simple change in personnel. This is a deliberate strike at the very heart of the global financial system, designed to dismantle the old guard and rebuild the engine of the economy. The conflict is simple, yet high stakes. Who should control the cost of money, the unelected scholars in suits, or the leaders chosen by the people? If the president succeeds in installing a loyalist, the traditional firewall between politics and the printing press will vanish, changing the dollar forever. To understand why this matters to your bank account, you have to look at the Fed's balance sheet, a monstrous $9 trillion mountain of debt. For years, the Fed has been the lender of last resort, buying up government bonds to keep the economy from sinking into a dark abyss. But the new vision for the Fed involves a radical shrinking of this footprint, a massive diet for a central bank that has grown far too large. If the Fed stops buying debt, interest rates won't just stay high, they could become volatile, unpredictable, and disconnected from your family's reality. Imagine a world where the president can lean on the Fed chair to slash interest rates right before an election to artificially boost the stock market. While that sounds great on the surface, it is a recipe for the kind of runaway inflation that turns your retirement fund into pocket change. The historical precedent for this kind of political interference is a graveyard of failed economies where the printing of money was used for short-term gains. Yet, the current administration argues that the Fed has become a deep state entity that slows down growth and prioritizes the elite. This isn't just a debate for economists. It is a battle over the price of your groceries, the cost of your car loan, and the stability of the dollar. If the Fed loses its credibility as an independent watcher, international investors might begin to flee, causing a slow-motion collapse of American dominance. The new appointee will face an impossible choice: follow the White House's mandate for cheap money, or hold the line against inflation. This tension is the invisible hand that will guide the next decade of your life, determining if we enter a golden age or chaos. We are watching the death of the technocratic era, where we trusted experts to manage the economy without the interference of partisan bickering. In its place, a new model is emerging, one where the economy is a direct tool of national policy used to protect domestic industries. Critics warn that a political Fed will lead to a loss of trust that can never be recovered, making the United States look like a struggling market. They argue that the only thing keeping the dollar valuable is the belief that the Fed won't print money just to please a president. On the other side, supporters claim the Fed has been wrong so many times, failing to see the 2008 crash or post-COVID inflation that it's time for a reboot. They believe a leader who aligns with America first will finally prioritize the domestic worker over the interests of global banking. The implications for the stock market are massive, as Wall Street hates uncertainty, and a shift in Fed leadership is the ultimate variable. If the market senses that the Fed is no longer independent, the risk premium for American assets will skyrocket, making everything more expensive. Every time the Fed meets to decide on interest rates, they are playing a game of chess with the future. And now, the rules are being read. The size of the Fed's balance sheet is the most technical, yet dangerous weapon in their arsenal, and the new leadership wants to disarm it. By shrinking the balance sheet, the Fed is essentially pulling liquidity out of the system, which can cause flash crashes and sudden spikes in borrowing. This is a high-wire act with no safety net, and the person the president chooses will have your financial future in their hands. The American public often ignores the Federal Reserve because it seems boring. But that is exactly how the most significant changes in history happen. We are moving toward a centralized control of money that mimics the systems of our rivals, a move that could save or destroy the dollar. If the new Fed chair keeps rates low to fund massive government deficits, we might see a short-term boom followed by a long-term inflationary nightmare. But if they tighten too hard to prove their independence, they could trigger a debt crisis that brings the housing market to its knees. Cause and effect are spiraling faster than ever before. A single change in a policy document at the Fed can move trillions of dollars in an afternoon. This is the new reality of place, where the boundary between the Treasury and the central bank is becoming dangerously and permanently blurred.
Have you ever stopped to think that the videos you just watched with flawless scripts and engaging narrations might have been created by someone who never even touched a camera or a microphone? There is a new digital elite profiting heavily behind the scenes of YouTube and social media. building massive channels without ever showing their faces or spending thousands of dollars on equipment. While most people are frozen by the fear of being on camera, these individuals are using the hidden power of artificial intelligence to generate automated content that works and earns for them 24 hours a day. The secret to dominating this game isn't about having a famous face. It's about knowing how to command the right tools to create scripts, voices, and visuals that magnetically hold the audience's attention. I've gained access to a strategic method that reveals the exact roadmap for you to build your own invisible digital empire. Mastering AI to turn clicks into a real source of income. It is the perfect opportunity for those seeking financial and geographical freedom without having to deal with the pressure of being a public figure on the internet. Best of all, you can seize this opportunity right now for a symbolic price. The complete training is under an exclusive promotion, dropping from $97 to just $17. This is your passport to unlocking the knowledge you need to start your professional journey with AI today. Click the first link in the description to secure your spot while this discount is still active.
You have to ask yourself if you trust the political process to manage the gears of the monetary system, or if independence was just a myth. Either way, the experiment is beginning, and there is no undo button once the new leadership begins to reshape the American dollar. Watch the gold markets, watch the bond yields, and watch the rhetoric coming out of Washington, because these are the early warning signs of an earthquake. We are witnessing the final days of the financial system as we knew it, and what comes next will be defined by the person at the table. This is not a drill. It is the fundamental restructuring of the American dream, where the value of your labor is tied to political whims. Prosperity is no longer given. It is a moving target in a world where the rules of money are being rewritten by those who disrupt the status quo. Stay vigilant and pay attention to the names being floated for these positions, because they will have more impact than any law passed by Congress. The drama at the Fed is the most important story in the world right now, even if it isn't the one dominating your social media feed. Your financial survival depends on your ability to see through the noise and understand that the independent Fed is a titan being brought to heel. Prepare your portfolio, diversify your assets, and understand that the era of predictable money has officially left the building for good. The question remains, will this lead to a resilient, growth-focused America, or will it be the beginning of the end for the dollar's dominance? Only time will tell, but by then, the changes to your purchasing power will already be set in stone and impossible to reverse. Think back to the 1970s, when inflation spiraled out of control because the Fed was too hesitant to act against political pressure from the White House. We saw gas lines, skyrocketing prices, and a lost decade of growth that only ended when a truly independent leader made the hard choices. The current strategy involves quantitative tightening, a process of removing money from the economy to cool down the fires of rising prices. If the new leadership reverses this process prematurely, we could see a temporary surge in asset prices that eventually collapses under its own weight. Small business owners are particularly vulnerable to these shifts, as their ability to get credit depends on the stability of the banking system the Fed oversees. A sudden change in the Fed's philosophy could mean the difference between expansion and bankruptcy for millions of entrepreneurs. Historically, the Fed has tried to balance full employment with price stability, a dual mandate that is becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. Adding a third unofficial mandate of political alignment could break the delegate machinery that keeps the American economy functioning. Global central banks in London, Tokyo, and Frankfurt are watching this transition with bated breath as the dollar remains the world's anchor. If the anchor starts to drift because of political interference, the entire global trade system could be thrown into a state of total disruption. The Fed put the idea that the central bank will always step in to save the markets is being tested like never before by this new administration. If the new chair signals that the market is on its own, we could see a repricing of risks that shakes the foundations of every 401k in America. There is also the issue of digital currency, a project the Fed has been exploring that could give the government even more control over how you spend. New leadership could either accelerate this path toward a cashless society or scrap it entirely in favor of a return to gold-backed thinking. We must remember that the Fed's power comes from its perceived neutrality, a shield that protects it from the volatile swings of public opinion. Once that shield is lowered to engage in the political fray, the bank becomes just another agency subject to the whims of the current party. The transition period between Fed chairs is always a window of vulnerability, where markets test the resolve and the communication style of the new leader. This time, the window is wider, the stakes are higher, and the participants are much more aggressive than we have ever seen. Wealth inequality has often been blamed on the Fed's policies of keeping rates low, which benefits those who own assets while hurting those who save. The new administration claims their changes will fix this, but the risk is that they might accidentally make the gap even wider. Real estate markets are essentially a derivative of the Fed's interest rate decisions, meaning your home's value is directly tied to this power struggle. A loyalist chair might keep rates low to help buyers, but the resulting inflation could make insurance and taxes completely unaffordable. The bond vigilantes, large-scale investors who sell off government debt when they don't like policy, are waiting in the shadows for a reason to strike. If they lose faith in the new Fed chair's autonomy, they will drive up rates themselves, regardless of what the Fed actually wants. This is a story about the soul of the American economy, whether it belongs to the market, the experts, or the people who hold the power. Every generation faces a moment where the financial social contract is renegotiated, and for us, that moment has finally arrived in full force. As the nominations proceed, you will hear a lot of noise about modernizing the Fed, but always look at who benefits from these changes. Money is never neutral. It is a tool of power, and that power is being moved from one side of the table to the other as we speak. The Fed's independence was established after the Great Depression to ensure that we never again suffered from the catastrophic errors of a mismanaged money supply. To dismantle that independence is to gamble with the lessons of history, hoping that this time the outcome will be different. We are living through a live experiment in monetary theory, and every citizen is an unwilling participant in the trial. There are no safe havens when the world's reserve currency is undergoing a fundamental transformation of its governing principles and its core leadership. If you have debt, this shift could be your greatest ally or your worst enemy, depending on how the new chair handles the inflation interest rate balance. If you are a saver, you are likely the one who will pay the hidden tax of inflation if the political pressure for low rates wins out. The complexity of these topics is often used to keep the average person from asking too many questions about where their money actually comes from. But when the price of a loaf of bread doubles in a few years, the complexity no longer matters, only the results of the policy do. The size of the balance sheet might sound like a dry accounting term, but it is actually the measure of how much the government has intervened in the market. Reducing that size is a painful process of detox for an economy that has become addicted to the Fed's constant support. We must also consider the impact on the national debt, which is now so large that interest payments alone are becoming a massive part of the federal budget. A Fed chair who keeps rates low to help the government pay its bills is a chair who has abandoned the fight against inflation. The climax of this story will be the confirmation hearings, where the vision for the new Fed will be laid out for all to see. It will be a moment of truth for the American financial system, a fork in the road that will define our prosperity for the next 30 to 40 years. Do not be lulled into a sense of security by the daily fluctuations of the green numbers on your screen. The structural changes are happening beneath the surface. The Fed is the heart of the system, and a heart transplant is always a high-risk procedure, no matter how skilled the surgeon is. In the end, we all want a stable currency and a growing economy, but we often disagree on the best path to get there. The current administration's path is one of disruption and bold action, a direct challenge to the business-as-usual attitude that has dominated for decades. Prepare yourself for a period of high volatility and intense debate, as the very definition of a central bank is debated in the town squares and the halls of power. Your financial literacy is now your best defense against the coming waves of change that will hit every shore. What do you think about the president appointing a new head of the Fed? Is it a necessary move to fix the system, or a dangerous risk to our economy? Let me know your opinion in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for more deep dives, and don't forget to leave a like if you found this insight valuable.